The desert, it absorbs. It swallows sound, light, and sometimes, people. On August 3, 2025, David Reyes, 34, truck driver, ex-Army, and newly divorced, was hauling a cargo of industrial batteries from El Paso to Reno. His dispatcher warned him about storms moving in from the Mojave. But David was on a deadline, and besides, he'd driven this stretch a dozen times before. Until that night, the sky was bone dry, but thunder rolled somewhere distant. His GPS blinked once, then glitched, no signal. The desert around him stretched in every direction, a flat sea of red dust and jagged rock. Then he saw it, a gas station. It hadn't been on any previous trip. Neon flickered above the rusted awning. EATS, gas res. An old diner sat beside it, shutters drawn, but the lights inside glowed faintly yellow. He pulled in. No other cars, no people, but the gas pumps looked operational, and his tank was running low as he stepped out. The heat hit him thick and wrong, as if it were pressing against his skin rather than radiating from the ground. The sign above the station creaked in the wind, though the air was still. Then he noticed the payphone by the front door. It was ringing, old-fashioned rotary style, bright red receiver. No wires attached. Ring. David stared at it. Something about the sound tugged at a place deep in his spine, a primal warning. He answered anyway. Hello. Static. Then, a woman's voice, whispering, choked, like someone half submerged in water. Don't let it in. It wears your face. Click. David dropped the receiver. It hit the booth floor with a dull thud. That's when the light inside the diner turned off, and the front door slowly opened on its own. David's hand hovered near the glove box, where he kept a small revolver. He wasn't a paranoid man by nature, but something about the silence in this place felt sharpened, like broken glass pressed against his ears. Still, the voice on the phone, don't let it in. It wears your face. He stepped toward the diner. The front door had creaked open just enough to reveal a glimpse of the inside booths, lined with dust. A counter stained by age, an old jukebox in the corner humming quietly. With no power, no people, no movement, and yet, the place smelled of freshly brewed coffee. He pushed the door all the way open. A bell chimed overhead, not the warm jingle of welcome, but a flat, dissonant clang, like a wrong note in a lullaby. The air inside was thick with humidity, as if the desert had been replaced with a swamp. His boots crunched over something brittle. Looking down, he saw the floor was littered with dead flies. At the far end of the diner, behind the counter, stood a coffee pot full and steaming. He turned to leave. Then he saw the mirror behind the bar, and in it, he was already sitting at a booth, not standing, not shocked, just calmly staring back at himself, wearing the same clothes, same tired face. The double raised a coffee cup, sipped, and smiled. David spun around. The booth was empty, but in the mirror was still there. He was still there, and now the reflection leaned forward, eyes narrowing. Its mouth moved. You took too long. The bell above the diner door screamed as it slammed shut behind him. David lunged for the door, but it wouldn't budge. He rammed it with his shoulder once, twice, until it gave way with a violent snap, flinging him back into the desert night. The diner behind him fell into darkness. He sprinted to his truck, slammed the door, and started the engine. It roared to life. Tires screeched. Dust kicked up. That gas station was gone in his rearview mirror, within seconds. But the unease didn't fade. Not when the sky behind him began to ripple like wet plastic. Not when every road sign he passed after that was marked the same way. Mile 303. He passed one, then another, and another. Each one had been sliced, as if by claws, their green metal bent and curling outward. David glanced at the clock. 11:17 p.m. He checked the odometer. He'd been driving for nearly 40 minutes, but his GPS was still frozen, showing him motionless in the middle of a blank map. Then he saw something on the side of the road. A man, waving, covered in dust and blood. David braked hard. The man staggered forward into the headlights. His eyes were wide, mouth twitching. David rolled down the window an inch. "Hey, are you hurt?" The man slammed his palm against the window. "It takes faces. It took my wife's face. Don't look at it. Don't." Something snatched him from the shadows. There was no sound, just a blur of motion, like a fast-forwarded scene of violence. 1 second the man was there. The next he was gone, leaving only a smear of red across the window, and a low, dragging hiss echoing into the night. David floored the gas as he passed the next sign. He finally saw it properly. Burned into the reflective metal were 4 words that hadn't been there before. "You can't leave now." David didn't stop again, even as the road rippled in his headlights, even as the sky above began to lose its stars one by one, even as shadows flickered in the mirrors, mimicking his every move like dancers caught between the lines of time and heat. The air inside the truck turned cold, icy. He turned up the heat, but the vents breathed frost. That's when he saw her, a figure standing on the shoulder, thumb out, drenched in sweat and blood, skin the color of candle wax. Her dress was from another decade, 1950s maybe, but it was torn, as if she'd crawled through barbed wire. She didn't flinch as he sped toward her. David swerved to avoid her, but she was suddenly in the passenger seat, just there, sitting silent. Her face was smooth, too smooth. No nose, no eyebrows, just a blank canvas of flesh with a mouth that smiled too wide. "I walked this road until my feet turned black," she whispered. "Then they took my feet, then my hands, then my name." David screamed, the truck veering wildly. She leaned in close, breath cold and thick like formaldehyde. "Don't scream. They love that." He turned to look and she was gone. But in the passenger seat, resting neatly on the cracked vinyl, was something damp and red, a pair of severed feet. He swerved off the road and stopped the truck, chest heaving. His phone, vibrated. No bars, no GPS, but a text had somehow come through. "You're almost there. They're waiting." The desert around him began to hum. David stayed frozen in the truck, too afraid to move, too afraid to breathe. The desert had gone silent. No wind, no bugs, no engine noise. Just that persistent hum vibrating in his chest like an electric current buried in the bones of the earth. When he finally opened the door, the air tasted metallic like blood and dust up ahead, just beyond. The next rise, he saw it. A town, no name on a sign, no lights in the windows. Just shapes, rows of buildings half sunken into the sand. Telephone poles tilted like broken fingers. A church steeple cracked down the center. He didn't remember passing it on the map. He didn't remember any towns in this stretch of desert. Yet, there it was, waiting. There it was, waiting. He walked, footsteps sank into the sand, the grains sticking to his skin like ashes. As he entered the main street, David noticed something deeply wrong. The buildings were perfectly preserved, but lifeless. Dust-covered mannequins sat motionless in diners and barbershops, dressed like people from different eras: 1920s flappers, 1950s housewives, 1980s punks, and every single mannequin had no face. In the center of town stood an old carousel, slowly spinning with no wind, no music. The horses on it were carved from bone, rib cages and vertebrae and skulls where heads should be. David's phone vibrated again, another message. "Don't look at the church." He looked at the church. It towered over everything else, ancient stone, eaten away by time. Its doors had been clawed open from the inside, and something had crawled out. There were scratch marks in the sand, inhumanly wide. As David approached, the bell above rang on its own, a low, rotten clang like iron submerged in water. Inside, the pews were full, not of people, not of mannequins, but skin, laid out flat and empty, like clothing pulled inside out, folded neatly, arranged in rows, every last one with no face. David turned to flee and the sand beneath him began to move. Hands, dozens, maybe hundreds, pale, hands reaching up from the ground, clutching his ankles, yanking, pulling him down. He screamed as he sank into the earth. As the town began to laugh in voices that weren't human, then silence, he woke in the truck, parked at the side of the road, sunlight spilling over the horizon. The town was gone. Had it ever been there? David didn't remember climbing back into the truck. He didn't remember starting the engine or driving west. But there he was, hands locked on the steering wheel. The yellow line of Highway 191 stretching endlessly ahead of him through the scorched desert. The sun rose sluggishly, as if reluctant to witness what came next. His GPS had reset. The screen was static, no map, no signal. Just a blinking blue dot spiraling in place. David's hands trembled. Something had changed in him. The silence of that faceless town still rang in his ears. The skin, the church. But worst of all, he couldn't remember his own face in the rearview mirror. Something moved, not behind the truck, in the mirror. At first it looked like a dark, shaped like a silhouette, trapped inside the glass, swimming just beneath the surface. Then it pressed its face closer. A smiling man with no eyes, just black holes, wide and wet. His mouth stretched too far, teeth too many. David looked away. The face stayed in the mirror. He reached for his phone, desperate to call for help. It buzzed the second he picked it up. "You're on the wrong road, David. You let them see you. Now they'll ride with you forever." He dropped the phone. It shattered on the floor mat. Something knocked on the back window. 3 slow taps. Then silence. He didn't dare look. He just drove, faster and faster, engine screaming under the desert sun. But the highway wouldn't end. There were no exits, no signs, just sand. He passed a car, crash. A burning sedan flipped upside down in the sand. A woman crawled from it, arms broken, mouth open in a scream. He tried to stop. The moment his foot touched the brake, the steering wheel spun itself hard right. The truck jerked back onto the road. He gripped the wheel, struggling, but it wouldn't budge. Behind him, the woman vanished into smoke. Later, the sky turned dark, too fast, too wrong. It wasn't night. It was something else. A void overhead, filled with static, swirling like a galaxy made of broken television signals. And from the blackness above, they descended. Figures, drifting like jellyfish, human-shaped, but wrong, hollow, transparent, faceless, each one dragging something behind them. David squinted through the windshield and screamed. They were dragging versions of him, some burned, some flayed, some with mouths stitched shut, some still alive, eyes wide in agony. The highway began to twist, looping in impossible angles, straight lines bending into spirals, overpasses where no overpasses should exist. He drove into one and found himself upside down, the desert above him, the sky below, gravity no longer applied, and in the passenger seat, something sat down. David felt it, the weight, the presence. He turned his head slowly and saw himself, but older, gaunt eyes sunken, skin torn. "Shouldn't have looked at the town," the doppelganger whispered. David swerved. The truck flipped. He woke up on the side of the road again. Morning. Stillness. The same stretch of highway. He checked the mirror. The reflection smiled back. It wasn't his face. He screamed. Final note. Highway 191 is still there. Locals call it the Devil's Spine. They say if you drive it alone at night, the road stretches longer than it should, that you might pass the same cactus again and again, that you'll feel like you're being followed, even if the mirror is empty. Some even claim to have seen the faceless town just past. Mile marker 54, where no town should be. If you go, don't look at the church, And whatever you do, don't check the rearview mirror. Don't check the rearview mirror.